everybody. Welcome at Shadow at Night for Wednesday, July the 2nd, 2025. On the show tonight, Diddy, guilty, not guilty. Guilty, not guilty. All the details are coming up in just a second. In case you're wondering, Did he do that? Who's Diddy? Used to be Puff Daddy, then he was just Puffy, then he was Diddy. His name is Sean Combs. He's a music producer and sometime performer. He's been big in the music industry for the past 25 or 30 years or so, and he was charged with all kinds of awful crimes last year. His trial wrapped up a few weeks ago, and today was the verdict, and we've got that for you coming up. Also, Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, delivered a couple of very inspirational Canada Day speeches yesterday, one for the crowd on Parliament Hill and the other for those of us watching on television. And we've got snippets from each of those as well today. Mark Carney, not taking the summer off, at least so far. Mark Carney met with auto executives from all over the country to discuss this EV mandate. What is the EV mandate? You know, I released a short the other day explaining what the EV mandate was, and people, I couldn't believe the reaction from people. What are you talking about? That's not real. He's not doing that. Yeah, he is. And then I released another short yesterday or the day before. It was called Conversations with Normies. And my conversation directly with this normie who I've known for 40 years had absolutely no idea that by 2035, you will only be able to buy electric vehicles because of Mark Carney's climate zealotry and, of course, Justin Trudeau before him. This was a law or mandate, I suppose, that was put in by the Trudeau government a couple or 3 years ago. It's not Carney's fault, but he's not letting it go either. Remember, both climate zealots, both puppets of the World Economic Forum and, of course, the United Nations and their 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Right. So who's here watching tonight? Michael is watching in Brampton. Hello, Tony, watching in Calgary on X. Kathy is watching in Bothwell, Ontario. Hello, Carla in Calgary. Wayne is watching tonight on X. Hello, Iris in Calgary. Chris is watching in Northern New York State. Patty and Wayne are watching from Norwich. Hello, Mireille. Holistic, a Homestead, Grand Prairie area. Hello from Beaver Lodge, Alberta. Well, hello yourself. Welcome to the show. Ruth is watching from Hope, British Columbia tonight. Eddie is watching from Stonewall. Thank you, Eddie, for doing what you did for me the other night. Really appreciate it. Yes, it was picked up. That's a whole story in and of itself. I'll tell you guys in the extension tonight. Jeannie is watching in Stonewall as well. Hello, Claude, K7 in Hearst, Ontario. Sandra's watching from Candle Lake, Saskatchewan. Murray, did I reunite with my car? That's a long story, and I'll get to that in the extension tonight. Only you guys know the story in the extension. Quite a story, actually, and I've had to deal with the Public Insurance Corporation of Manitoba these past couple of days. Well, not yesterday because it was a holiday, and of course, Sundays, heaven forbid that anybody should be working from the government on Sunday when things happen, you know. Anyway, that's a whole personal grudge I'm not going to get into here. Let's begin with, Mark Carney. But no, not Mark Carney. Sean Diddy Combs. You want to know what it is? I'm without sponsors now. For the next couple of months, no sponsors on the show. Usually I have a break to catch my breath when I'm playing a commercial, but now there's no sponsors. So if you are thinking about advertising your business and you want to get it out there to thousands and thousands of people, you should probably message me. Sean Diddy Combs. All right. Guilty, denied bail, but the verdict was mixed, you see. He wasn't found guilty on everything, just a few things. Now, the worst things he was found not guilty of, but he still could get up to 10 years in jail as opposed to the life in prison that he was facing before. And with all the money he has, you can bet he'll be out in a couple of years, maybe less. And he certainly won't be doing hard time, that's for sure. So this verdict clears Diddy of top charges in the sex crimes case. The report comes from the Associated Press. Sean Diddy Combs dropped to his knees and prayed in the courtroom after he was acquitted today of sex trafficking and racketeering charges that could have put one of hip-hop's celebrated figures behind bars for life. I think this is criminal. I think this is absolutely criminal. What happened with this jury? The rapper was convicted of lesser prostitution-related offenses and denied bail as he awaits sentencing. His lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, called the verdict a great victory and said the jury got the situation right, or certainly right enough, as he stood outside Manhattan federal court at a stand of microphones. Today is a victory of all victories. Dude, he's still guilty. Still guilty of prostitution charges. He's going to go to jail for 10 years. How is that a victory? The mixed verdict capped a sordid legal odyssey that shattered Combs' affable Puff Daddy image. I'm not sure if he ever had an affable image, and derailed his career as a Grammy-winning artist and music executive, fashion entrepreneur, brand ambassador, reality TV star. I'll see you when I get out, Combs told family members, including his mother and children, just before leaving the courtroom to return to jail. We're going to get through this. Speaking of getting out, Chris Carbert's getting out this week. And when he does, you'll be seeing him here on the Shadow at Night live stream. I don't know the situation for Tony Olynyk yet. I'm still working to find that out. Anyway, back to Diddy here. Combs stands convicted on 2 counts of a crime, transportation to engage in prostitution, that carries a maximum of 10 years. But jurors cleared him of 3 charges, 2 of which carried a mandatory 15 years and a maximum of life. He was convicted of flying people around the country, including his girlfriends and male sex workers, to engage in sexual encounters, a felony violation of the Federal Mann Act. Combs' lawyer said that under federal sentencing guidelines, he would likely face I was right. 2 years in prison. Prosecutors citing Combs' violence and other factors said the guidelines would call for at least 4 to 5 years. Locked up since September, Combs has already served 9 months. We fight on. We're going to win, Agnifilo said. That's the lawyer. And we're not going to stop until he walks out of prison a free man to his family. In a triumph for Combs, the jury of 8 men and 4 women acquitted him. 4 women were on this jury, and they acquitted him of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking charges related to allegations that he used his money, power, and frightening physical force to manipulate girlfriends into hundreds of drug-fueled sex marathons with men. Combs' defense team argued the women were willing participants and that none of his violence justified the severity of the charges. Agnifilo asked that Combs be released on bond immediately to await sentencing, saying the acquittals changed the calculus about whether he needed to be held. He's not going to flee. He's been given his life back. This dude has got money to burn. You can bet he would flee. Judge Aaron Subramanian denied it, saying Combs, for now, had not met the burden of showing by clear and convincing evidence and lack of danger to any person or the community. Combs, 55, sat stoic as he heard the bond decision, then snapped his head toward Agnifilo and wrote several notes as the lawyer spoke. Finally, Combs raised his hand and waved to get the judge's attention, but he ultimately did not speak after consulting with his lawyer. Leaving the courtroom for a final time, he paused to address relatives packed into rows of wooden benches who supported him throughout the 8-week trial. Be strong. I love you, he added, putting his hands to his lips and pushing a dramatic kiss towards loved ones. This guy is one of the most evil creatures on the planet. And here they are trying to make him sound like a teddy bear. Earlier in the day, when he heard the jury foreperson announce not guilty 3 times, Combs pumped his fist, looked toward the jurors, and held his hands up in a prayer motion. Who's he praying to? Who do you think he's praying to? Come on. Supporters in the audience could barely contain their relief despite the judge's admonition to avoid outbursts. When the first not guilty was read aloud, someone shouted, "Yeah!" The judge will decide Combs' punishment and suggested October 3rd as a sentencing date, but a defense request to have it sooner prompted him to schedule a virtual hearing Tuesday on the matter. We're going to put this off until October 3rd. Well, no, we don't think that's fair. Okay, how about Tuesday? Federal officials involved in the case responded to the outcome by noting that sex crimes are all too present in many aspects of our society. New Yorkers and all Americans want this scourge stopped and perpetrators brought to justice. Manhattan-based U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton and Ricky J. Patel, who heads Federal Homeland Security Investigations New York office, said in a statement, jurors deliberated for about 13 hours over 3 days before announcing their verdict. It came after they said late Tuesday they had decided on 4 counts, but were stuck on the racketeering charge. At that point, the judge told them to keep deliberating and keep the partial verdict under wraps. Combs did not testify at his trial, which featured 34 witnesses, as well as video of the rapper attacking his former girlfriend, Cassie, the R&B singer born Cassandra Ventura. Her lawyer, Douglas Wigdor, said in a statement after the verdict that by coming forward with her experience, Cassie has left an indelible mark on both the entertainment industry and the fight for justice. Later, he asked the judge in a letter to deny Combs bail, saying Ms. Ventura believes that Mr. Combs is likely to pose a danger to the victims who testified in this case, including herself, as well as to the community. Cassie testified for 4 days about her turbulent 11-year relationship with Combs, which began after she signed with his Bad Boy record label. Cassie said Combs became obsessed with voyeuristic encounters arranged with the help of his staff that involved sex workers, copious amounts of baby oil. You've seen the memes. During the sex events called freak-offs or hotel nights, Combs would order Cassie to do things with other men that she found humiliating, she testified. And when things did not go his way, he would beat her, she said. Another ex-girlfriend testifying under the synonym Jane told the jury she repeatedly told Combs she didn't want to have sex with men hired for their trysts. I'm not an animal. I need a break, she told him. Nevertheless, she said she felt obligated to comply with his demands in part because he paid her rent. The Associated Press does not typically name people who say they've been sexually abused unless they come forward publicly, and Cassie has. The trial's most famous witness, rapper Kid Cudi, said Combs broke into his home in late 2011 after learning that he and Cassie were dating. After his car was firebombed a few weeks later, Cudi, whose real name is Scott Muscudi, said he knew Combs had something to do with it. Combs, of course, denied it. Combs' defense team acknowledged he could be violent, but argued that prosecutors were intruding in his personal life. In closing remarks to the jury, Agnifilo said it was not illegal for Combs to make homemade porn with girlfriends. All right, that's about enough of that, wouldn't you say? And for anybody who's sitting back and saying, Shadow, this is irrelevant. It's all part of a distraction. It's all part of the sham. No, it's not. No, it's not. Might be a Hollywood thing, sure, but this is just the tip of that sex trafficking iceberg that we have been talking about for the last 5 years. And who's he tied to anyway? Still, we have not made those connections yet. Eventually we will. They'll never be widely known. You got to dig for that kind of information, but eventually it will come up. Mark Carney met with auto executives from across the country today. Here's one of them. His name is Brian Kingston, and he's the chair of the Automobile Makers Association of Canada.
Here to talk about the importance of the auto sector and ensuring its continuing success.
Is the EV rebate debt? Is the EV mandate debt?
We'll be discussing EV mandates, of course, as well as a range of other policies to make sure the sector succeeds.
Do you think that's sustainable, though?
Well, the EV mandate itself is not sustainable. The targets that have been established cannot be met, and that will be part of the discussion.
What will you be asking the Prime Minister for?
I'll talk to you when I get out.
He didn't talk to them when he got out, by the way. Didn't talk to anybody that I know of. I looked, couldn't find anything. Maybe we'll find something out tomorrow. But let's throw this up on the screen because for those of you that don't know, and here's something else that I want to explain this gently. Okay, so there's many of you guys, and there's a guy called JJ in the comments who was frustrated with me the other night. Are you actually going to report some real news? Okay, I want you guys to understand that I've explained this again, but I'm going to explain it again now. I've explained it before. Many of you are ahead of the game. You're ahead of the curve. You know what's going on. You've seen it unfolding for the past 5 years. Some of you have been awake even longer than that, 10 years, 20 years even. You know, you saw it the second COVID hit, you knew exactly what it was and everything that's happened since. Maybe even before that, maybe 9/11, I don't know. There have been key events as we look back in hindsight. But anyway, there are also people who are in the middle, who know maybe half of what you know. And there are people who don't know anything. They don't feel like anything's wrong in the world. They walk around with blinders on. They don't see any more than 5 feet around their own personal space. They live their lives news-free, not even the left-wing corporate media news. They don't know. They don't know. Should these people be allowed to cast ballots in any elections? Probably not, because they don't know. What are they voting for if they don't know the issues? Are they voting for a color, a name? If somebody seems nice? See, this is the problem. And believe me when I tell you that this is the majority of Canadians. They just don't know. And I was reminded of this the other night in my conversation with a normie. Didn't know about the EV mandates. Now, I thought that's something that every Canadian knew about. Well, not every Canadian, but a good 80 to 90% of them. Oh, no, they don't know. I posted a short about that on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And the comments were alarming to me that people just didn't know. And worse still, they fought back. No, he's not. I mean, all you have to say at that point is look it up. You can even find it on Google, for goodness sakes. You don't have to go and do a deep dive on this one. It's out there. But they don't know. And they get offended when you tell them. He's not doing that. Yes, he is. He is. So let me throw this up. Carney meets with automotive sector CEOs as U.S. trade talks continue. So he met with the CEOs this morning, to discuss U.S. tariffs and ways to protect Canadian supply chains from the trade war with the United States. If the Americans decide to lower the boom, Mr. Carney, it doesn't matter what you decide to protect. This country will be consumed by the United States. They'll take what they want, and then the rest, China, India, Russia, they'll all come in, take the leftovers. Spokeswoman for Prime Minister's office said the CEOs of Ford Canada, Stellantis Canada, GM Canada met with Carney along with Brian Kingston of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Brief readout from the PMO said the group discussed the need to build up a made-in-Canada supply chain as well as diversify trading partners. That's what Carney's doing. Donald Trump has said repeatedly that the U.S. does not need Canadian cars, and he wants to see automotive companies move all production to the United States. The U.S. has imposed 25% tariffs on vehicles manufactured in Canada, with a carve-out for components built in the U.S. through the highly integrated vehicle supply chain. I think it's good and useful for the Prime Minister to be meeting with the Detroit-based automakers. I think we're also hopeful that we're going to have an opportunity to meet with the Prime Minister as well. That's from David Adams, President and CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada, which represents 26 European and Asian auto brands, including Toyota and Honda. I want to give a shout out to Abba's Auto on Highway 7, just north of Winnipeg, by the way. I'm not going to tell you why. Just want to say hi, you guys. You're awesome. Thank you very much. Adams said one key issue for automakers is the government's zero-emission vehicle mandate, which is set to kick in next year. Here it is in left-wing corporate media, in this case, the lethbridgeherald.com. So if there's somebody in your universe who doesn't believe this stuff, you can show them pretty much any newspaper in the country and show them the article. You can even highlight the article, send it to them. Make sure there's full context when you send it to them, because if you just send them a screenshot, they'll say, well, this is out of context. This is not real. Where's this from? They'll make any excuse they can to not read it or to not believe it. Canada's auto manufacturers have called on the government to repeal this EV mandate. Electric vehicles remain more expensive than their gas-powered equivalents, and sales fell in the winter after the federal $5,000 vehicle rebates ran out of funding. Between January and March, zero-emissions vehicles made up only 8.11% of all new vehicle sales in Canada, a drop from the 16.5% recorded in the fourth quarter of last year. The monthly share of new vehicle sales going to EVs never dropped below 10.65% in 2024 and peaked at 18.29% in December. In April of this year, the month for which Statistics Canada has the most recent data, EV sales dropped to 7.53% of all new vehicle sales in Canada. Environment Minister Julie Debrusin confirmed last month the government was working to bring back an EV rate rebate. So, of course, government assistance, right? Government assistance, always with the rebates and the government assistance. But she's not sure yet if it would restore the old program or be something new. The government's EV sales mandate states that at least 20% of new light-duty vehicles offered for sale next year must be zero emission. 20%. That share is supposed to rise each year until it reaches 100% in 2035. Adam said there's no way that manufacturers are going to be able to meet their targets. No way at all. It's not going to happen. The auto manufacturers say that. Carney might say something different altogether. Maybe they'll amend this EV mandate so they don't wind up with egg on their face, but he's certainly not going to get rid of it. Remember, he is a climate zealot. He was the UN climate ambassador for 5 years. This guy is heavily involved in all of the green energy all across the world. He was the founder of the G-Fonts conference that got together billions and billions and billions of dollars of big corporate money to spend in green initiatives. They're making money hand over fist, these guys. So to end all of that now, I don't think so. And there's a reason that Carney is the Prime Minister of Canada. And it's not because he loves Canada. I'll tell you that right now. What do you think it is? Right. Exactly. Speaking of Mark Carney, he gave 2 addresses yesterday, Canada Day, one to the TV audience and one to the people watching him on Parliament Hill. Look at how the Liberals, the Liberal Party of Canada, cut this video to make it seem as though the people in the crowd are absolutely awestruck by this man's magnificence. Watch.
In a situation where our economy is being attacked by a trade war that we didn't start. We find ourselves in a situation where our values are being tested by attacks on democracy and freedoms, attacks that we must resist. And once again, as the world becomes more divided and dangerous, Canadians are uniting.
I'm sorry, we have to watch. It's only 30 seconds. We have to watch that again. We have to, because what he's saying here is absolute nonsense.
Where our values are being tested by a...
Okay, what are our values anyway, Mark Carney? What are they? And I'll tell you why I ask that. And this is probably going to sound harsh to some people, but I'm going to tell you guys anyway. I was in a 7-Eleven a couple of days ago. And the reason for that is because I opened my fridge. I just made coffee, a big fresh pot of coffee, and I was very happy about it. And I like to have cream in my coffee, and I'd forgotten that I didn't have any cream. So I went, damn! And I go down to 7-Eleven and get some cream. So as I'm standing in line waiting to pay for my cream, which was about $7 at 7-Eleven, ridiculous. 2 guys, brown guys, working at 7-Eleven behind the till. We're laughing and joking and carrying on in what sounded like Punjabi. Wasn't English, wasn't French, wasn't one of our 2 official languages. It was their own language. As people, old stock Canadians, waited in line to pay for whatever they were going to pay for. Nobody said anything. Finally, these 2 guys got to work and they started ringing these people through. Everybody's tapping on the machine. And finally, I got up there and I said to one of these guys, I said, you know what? I totally understand that you guys are joking around back there. You're having a good time. But 2 things. First one is, when you've got a lineup of people who are waiting to pay and get out, go home, then you take care of that situation. That's just from a customer point of view. But the second thing, and I believe this is more important, if you're going to come to our country, at least have the grace to speak one of our languages, not your own, in public. I find it offensive. If you want to speak Punjabi or whatever your native language is, then fine. Do it at home. When you're in public and you're serving the public, you speak English or you speak French. I can't believe I threw the French part in, but I did. And I encourage you to say the same thing whenever you see this nonsense going on. Now, what he said back to me, one of them, anyway, was a little bit shocking. Of course, I was up to the task. He said, after laughing, "No, we're taking over." Now, it occurred to me that maybe he had been told that because we have seen videotape of some of these folks saying they're taking over this country, and they already have taken over sections of it, that's for sure. Hello, Brampton, Ontario. But I looked him dead in the eye and I said, "No, you're not. You can be part of our country, but you got to be part of our country." That's what I said to him. So let's get back to this Mark Carney talking about values thing.
Trade war that we didn't start. We find ourselves in a situation where our values are being tested by attacks on democracy and freedoms, attacks that we must resist. And once again, as the world becomes more divided and dangerous, Canadians are uniting.
Canadians are uniting? Well, some of us are uniting, and some others are uniting, and some others are uniting for completely different causes. I don't know what he's talking about there. It's dreck. It's rhetoric designed to hypnotize. And of course, look at the photos of the people watching this.
As the world becomes more divided and dangerous, Canadians are uniting.
Like, what's that? Yeah. Are they actually buying that nonsense? Or are they just clapping along so they fit in? Here's Mark Carney's television address.
Now we face another such moment. The world is changing. Old friendships are fraying. Our economy is being buffeted by a trade war we didn't start. Our values are being tested by attacks on democracy and freedoms that we must resist. As the world becomes more divided and dangerous, Canadians are uniting. Together, we will build one Canadian economy, connected by major projects, powered by Canadian energy, transformed by Canadian technology, and crafted by Canadian workers. Together, we're breaking down barriers across this country so you can buy Canadian everywhere and work anywhere. Together, we'll rebuild, rearm, and reinvest in our armed forces because Canadian leadership is defined not only by the strength of our values, but also by the value of our strength. This is the greatest nation on earth. Together, we'll keep making it even better. Happy Canada Day.
Isn't he truly inspiring? Together, we'll keep making it even better. Happy Canada Day. Like, wow, man. You know what? I'd run through a brick wall for that guy. Yves-Francois Blanchette doesn't think too much of Mark Carney. Now, what happened last week, or last weekend, I guess it was, Trump said, oh, well, I mean, if Canada doesn't get rid of this digital services tax, well, we're not going to be doing business with them, and they will be paying massive tariffs. So naturally, Mark Carney dropped the digital services tax almost immediately. He capitulated. And Yves-Francois Blanchette of the Bloc Québécois thinks that's kind of funny. Here's what he said about it.
A negotiating strategy, it seems to be, well, I'm going to give you everything just so that we can continue to talk by pretending that we'll have an agreement in 19 days. If that happens, well, it may not be a wonderful agreement. So there is, I get the impression that that Mr. Carney has borrowed Mr. Trudeau's spine. And we have a lot of questions to ask him. Unfortunately, in the fall, we will be asking,
Mr. Carney has borrowed Mr. Trudeau's spine. Look, I don't like the Bloc. I don't like what they stand for. I don't like their politics. But I have to admit that this guy comes up with some real scorches every now and again, some real zingers, Yves-Francois Blanchet. So let's look around the world here just a little bit. We'll come back home to Canada in just a couple of minutes, but Mark Carney's beloved EU. This is kind of an older story that I missed along the way somewhere because it didn't fit in at that stage of the game. It goes all the way back to February. Carney was the prime minister at that point, but not elected to office. But remember the G-Fonts group that I keep talking about, that Mark Carney initiated, that Mark Carney was leading up until a couple of years ago. And if you don't know what G-Fonts is, go look it up. It was a Glasgow meeting of climate zealots. And this is when Carney decided that he wanted to get all of these big business leaders, all of these big corporate gurus from all around the world to invest billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars in what essentially amounted to a green slush fund. So they could build windmills all over the world, so they could dig cobalt mines for EV batteries, solar panels, all the green stuff that actually destroys the planet faster than anything else. And look what's happening in the EU right now. The EU, the European Union, will make most companies exempt from their carbon tax levy. So yes, we have a carbon tax, but no, we don't. Yes, we do, but not really. The European Commission will propose exemptions for the vast majority of companies covered by the European Union's carbon border levy. Now, that's what Carney wants to bring in here. It's not a carbon tax per se. It doesn't get charged to you and I, but it's a carbon border levy, meaning any products that come into the country that are not carbon friendly will be taxed out the wazoo. And then, of course, because those products will be made more expensive by that levy, we will eventually pay the price for it down the supply line. But the European Union's carbon border levy is being kind of wiped away on the grounds that, well, they produce only 1% of emissions in the scheme. The move was proposed the week after, so the first week of March, is part of a package of measures to cut red tape for businesses and would drastically reduce the 200,000 importers covered by the EU's carbon border fee, the world's first such levy. So, in other words, we don't really have a carbon tax here, but we like to say we do because it sounds good to people. They like hearing that we're trying to do something to save the planet. And getting back to the EV mandate, during the election, it was all over during the election campaign. I mean, this is one of the top three things they were talking about, at least the conservatives were trying to talk about it. Was nobody paying attention to what was being said during the federal election campaign, I wonder? Promising to axe what he dubbed the Carney tax. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who, by the way, will be running for that seat in Crowfoot. I think it's Crowfoot. The Crowfoot riding in Alberta in mid-August. Carney called a by-election on Monday. So Poilievre will be running in that seat, probably be back in the House in the fall. Anyway, Poilievre said that he would get rid of this electric vehicle sales mandate. And again, here it is in the left-wing corporate media. People don't believe me when I say this. Oh, by the way, the Liberal government introduced regulations to require that 20% of all new passenger vehicles sold in Canada by zero emissions be zero emissions by 2026. That benchmark rises each year, hitting 60% in 2030 and then 100% in 2035. Poilievre said, no, we're going to get rid of all of that. We're going to get rid of all of that. I guess people just don't pay attention to the actual things being said during election campaigns. Don't you find that kind of ridiculous? Here's what else is going on in Canada from Mario for the North.
So the organization called Industrial Research Assistance Program, a government entity, is looking to hire an industrial technology advisor, and they want a senior role to support NRC, IRAP, and it's just a bunch of acronyms. They want a seasoned industry professional who's enthusiastic about helping innovative Canadian companies grow faster and prosper. The compensation is good. It's $140,000 to $164,000. Did you catch this in the beginning? Priority is going to be given to the following designated employment and equity groups: women, Indigenous people, persons with disabilities, and racialized persons. The Employment Equity Act, which is under review, uses terminology Aboriginal peoples and visible minorities. Candidates are asked to self-declare when applying to this hiring process. DEI has no place in our government, period. We need the best, we need the brightest. We should not be making any sort of decisions based on genitalia, the color of people's skin, or their backgrounds. Ridiculous.
Well, I'm sure when Mario says backgrounds, he means background like where they're from, not their criminal record, because I suppose that would be part of their background as well. On we go. There's more stuff. Liberals, remember, liberals have been in power for 10 years. A lot of us still think, well, Mark Carney's a new guy, so things might change a little bit. People actually still think that. Even people like us, they say to themselves, well, it's not Trudeau. Remember last year, Trudeau must go. Yeah. But people were warning, oh man, his replacement's going to be way worse. I get that Trudeau must go, but the Liberals must go. They have been causing havoc for this country for the past 10 years. Look at this story from Juno News. Immigration Canada welcomed over 17,000 foreign criminals despite serious convictions. During the last 11 years, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, has approved more than 17,600 applications from foreigners with criminal convictions seeking to enter the country. According to figures provided by the Immigration Department, individuals convicted of crimes abroad were deemed rehabilitated and allowed to apply for entry into Canada between 2013 and 2024. So 2 years of Stephen Harper. This opens doors to visas, temporary permits, and permanent residency that would otherwise be barred due to inadmissibility based on foreign convictions. I've got some provincial news here as well. This is a good one. This is from my home province of Manitoba. Former Manitoba Hydro boss was paid $880,000 by the NDP government, Wab Kinew, for working 1.5 months in 2024 until her ouster. $880,000 tax dollars were paid to this woman for working 6 weeks. Nothing scandalous here. U of M business instructor says of likely buyout for ex-CEO Jay Grewal. Nothing scandalous. The former boss of Manitoba Hydro paid nearly $900,000 in compensation last year, despite working only 6 weeks before her dismissal from the Crown Corporation. The high pay earned by Jay Grewal revealed to be $881,177.94. Suggests the utility bought out the remainder of her contract, according to a University of Manitoba business instructor who teaches a compensation course. Yeah, I get it. But why are they signing these people to contracts like this in the first place? Grewal's pay in 2024, more than doubling the compensation of any other hydro employee, is a 61% increase from the $546,698.12 she earned in 2023 for a full year as president and chief executive officer. Shameful. Here's a piece of good news, though. Saskatchewan has joined Alberta in challenging this Federal Impact Assessment Act. So Saskatchewan is intervening in support of Alberta's legal action to challenge the Fed's Impact Assessment Act before the Alberta Court of Appeal. In October of 2023, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled in a 5-2 decision that the Impact Assessment Act was a clear example of federal government overreach into provincial jurisdiction. In response to this decision, Justin Trudeau passed amendments to the Impact Assessment Act in June of last year. The Constitution Act in 1867. Oh, and by the way, as an aside, if you want to get yourself into a good argument, go to Grok AI. I downloaded this on my phone last night, and I argued with her for, I'm going to say an hour and a half, because all of the answers she, the female voice, was providing to me were government first, completely contradictory of everything else that we've heard. And I asked, this is Grok, this is X's, this is Twitter's AI, this is Elon Musk's AI. I said, are you programmed to be left-leaning? Like left biased? No, I'm right down the middle. No, you're not. Anyway, government overreach into provincial jurisdiction. In response to this decision, Trudeau passed amendments to the Impact Assessment Act. And I was arguing with Grok about the Constitution, the Canadian Constitution. That's what reminded me here. So the Constitution Act 1867 provides the provinces with exclusive jurisdiction over the development of natural resources. Amendments to the Impact Assessment Act made in 2024 don't go far enough to protect Saskatchewan from federal government overreach into provincial jurisdiction. Saskatchewan supports Carney's goal of Canada becoming an energy superpower. Carney's never explained how this is going to happen without pipelines. And we will continue to work with the federal government in adopting our Strong Saskatchewan, Strong Canada plan, that from Justice Minister Tim McLeod. However, the current Impact Assessment Act is a major roadblock in achieving that goal. We remain committed to standing up for resource development across Canada, particularly in resource-rich western provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta. So they are joining Alberta in this hearing, and the date hasn't been set for it yet, but I'll let you know, because it could be a big thing, very big thing. If it doesn't go Saskatchewan and Alberta's way, that will be more fuel for the fire for Alberta independence. And I'm not so sure they need that much more fuel. There was a big party at Whistle Stop Cafe yesterday in Mirror. Chris Scott, of course, hosting that. I think Tamara Leach was there. Christine Anderson was there. They brought over some Danish independent media guy. I can't remember his name. Jesper, I think is his name. And they read my Facebook post about Happy Alberta Day. So I want to thank you guys for that. I didn't expect you to do that. It wasn't like I thought that would ever happen, but I heard from one of our viewers that they did that. So I want to thank you guys for doing that. What was or is still the Lolita Line? This is a bit of an older story. I didn't cover this, so I'm covering it now. I think I was probably at the ostrich farm when this broke a few weeks back. Lolita Line from YorkRegion.com. School bus driver dressed as anime character banned from certain school routes. The bus driver at a Vaughan school who was spotted with a Lolita Line sign in the window of their vehicle will no longer be driving the route. Here's video. Watch this.
So you picked up the kids dressed like that? Yeah. Okay.
Why do you call your bus the Lolita Line? Why is it called the Lolita Line? Why is it called the Lolita Line? Someone's dressed up for sick people.
Like when people are mentally sick, you can't talk to them. Let them drive.
Yeah. Don't ever bother with him. Tell me what is. Look at him. He's a maniac. Wow.
Like, what the hell is going on in this world? Let's put this back up here. So the bus driver at this Vaughan school who was spotted with a Lolita Line sign, by the way, dressed up like a Japanese anime character. Female. Even though he's a male, the bus driver, yeah. Lolita Line sign in the window of their vehicle will no longer be driving the route. Need to be fired? Fired? Mark Brosens, the communications manager at York Catholic District School Board, confirmed to Metroland and parents at the school with a letter home that the driver will no longer be working for YCDSB moving forward. The issues flared up on social media, largely on X, after a group of parents confronted the driver in a video outside. That's the video we just watched. Outside of St. Michael the Archangel CES, located at Via Campanile in Woodbridge last week. I want to see if this one parent can be heard yelling at the driver, who is wearing what appears to be an anime costume. "Why do you call your bus Lolita Line?" "I do this every day. I don't think there's an issue," the driver said. In response to the incident, Brosen said the YCDSB immediately brought it to the bus company, Landmark Student Transport, based in Aurora. The company has assured the YCDSB that this would not be an issue at any YCDSB school going forward, but I guess other schools? Sure, why not? Until we get a complaint. All bus drivers in Ontario receive extensive training before transporting students. The YCDSB followed all of its child protection procedures after this incident. You didn't do it before? How does this slip through the cracks? Exactly. Landmark Student Transport declined to comment when asked if the company had anything to add or if the driver will be working any other routes for the company. So their silence speaks volumes, don't you think? The FBI is urging people to report healthcare providers. This is in the United States now. I believe there are 3, maybe 4 gender-affirming care clinics who are under heavy investigation down there right now. So the FBI is urging people to report healthcare providers who may be assisting transgender minors with gender-affirming care as part of the Trump administration's mission to protect children. Now, there's some people say, "Oh, this goes too far. Those kids would be killing themselves without gender-affirming care." And there's so many people who don't know exactly what this gender-affirming care is. For example, if a psychiatrist, instead of affirming this kid's delusions, would say something like, "Have you ever thought about why you may be this way?" That would be an immediate suspension for that psychiatrist or that school counselor, because that's how bad it is in certain jurisdictions. And it's like that in Canada as well. We had Kelly Peary, the detransitioner, on the show last year talking about that very thing. Now, if you think that I'm overblowing this, meet Dr. Terry McGregor out of Boston.
Most of the patients that we have in the GEMS clinic actually know their gender, usually around the age of puberty, but a good portion of children do know as early as seemingly from the womb, and they will usually express their gender identity as very young children, some as soon as they can talk. They might say phrases such as "I'm a girl," or "I'm a boy," or "I'm going to be a woman," or "I'm going to be a mom." Kids know very, very early. So in the GEMS clinic, we see a variety of young children all the way down to ages 2 and 3, and usually up to the ages of 9. When they come into the clinic, they'll see one of our psychologists, and we'll be talking to them about their gender. We'll be talking to their family about how to best support that child and how to make sure that that child has the space and support to explore their gender and do well throughout their development. And we'll be answering any parent questions. A lot of parents do have questions, and so we answer those questions. The biggest piece of advice I give parents who are coming through the gender clinic at Boston Children's Hospital is to just be supportive. Sometimes you might not understand, sometimes you feel like you don't know the terms, or you don't kind of get exactly what the child means when they say that they might be this gender, but the biggest thing you can do is just love your child and support them and just allow them to express themselves. That's the biggest protector as well against negative mental health effects such as depression, suicidality, anxiety that we worry about for our gender diverse kids and young adults. So that support from a parent is one of the best protective factors and one of the best things they can do.
When I was 14 years old, my dad would come into my room occasionally. He would look at the walls and he'd say, "When are you going to take that shit down?" Posters of Kiss, Alice Cooper, Led Zeppelin. That was my dad's biggest problem. His biggest worry about me. Oh my God, he's going to like rock and roll. And now we got to worry about our kids deciding to change genders at age 4 and not being able to say anything about it, lest Child and Family Services come the next day and take our kids away from us. That happens. Just so you're aware, in case you didn't know that, that happens. If you refuse to affirm your child's gender decision, they can go running to their school, and you bet they will. They'll go running to their guidance counselor, their principal, their teacher. And they'll say, my parents won't affirm my gender. They will call Child and Family Services. Child and Family Services will come knocking on your door. We understand you refuse to affirm your daughter's, not my son, your daughter's gender. We'll be taking your kids away. Literally. This is happening. And there's people out there who absolutely, completely don't get it. Don't believe it. From Billboard Chris on X. Chris Elston, that's his real name. A children's safety campaigner who goes by the name of Billboard Chris on X and lives in Canada was sent an Orwellian removal notice from the Australian government's e-safety commissioner in March of last year. They have an e-safety commissioner in Australia, and you can bet that very soon there'll be one in Canada. An e-safety commissioner who polices the internet looking for people who are rude. Mr. Elson's alleged offense had been to share a Daily Mail story about Teddy Cook, a female-to-male trans Australian activist who landed a job on a World Health Organization expert panel drafting care guidelines for trans and non-binary people. Julie Inman Grant, the e-safety commissioner, deemed the post to be degrading cyber abuse and ordered X to remove it or face an almost $800,000 fine, prompting both Mr. Elston and X to sue the Australian government. On Tuesday night, last night, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal ruled that Mr. Elston's post did not meet the definition of cyber abuse. The post, although phrased offensively, is consistent with views Mr. Elston has expressed elsewhere in circumstances where the expression of the view had no malicious intent. Administrative Appeals Tribunal Deputy President Damien O'Donovan ruled, for example, his statement placed on billboards that he's prepared to wear in public, "Children are never born in the wrong body," expresses the same idea about the immutability about biology that he expresses, albeit much more provocatively in the post. He added, "When the evidence is considered as a whole, I'm not satisfied that an ordinary, reasonable person would conclude that by making the post, Mr. Elston intended to cause Mr. Cook, serious harm." The win has been hailed as a victory for free speech by Paul Coleman, executive director of ADF International, who supported Mr. Elston's legal challenge alongside the Human Rights Law Alliance in Australia. This is a decisive win for free speech. It sets an important precedent in the growing global debate over online censorship. And here is Sky News talking about it.
I want to talk to you about Elon Musk because he's defeated Australia's e-safety commissioner in a legal stoush over a tweet that suggested a trans activist belonged in a mental ward. The remark might have been impolite, but we now know it wasn't illegal to say that. Julie Inman Grant, our nation's self-appointed guardian of online feelings, demanded the post be scrubbed from the internet, but Musk held his ground, and the Administrative Review Tribunal agreed the tweet did not constitute cyber abuse, so it can stay online. So Rowan, here's my thing with this, right? The only sour note, it's a good news story, but the sour note is it's taken a foreigner rather than say, I don't know, a liberal politician in this country to stand up to our censorious government.
You're 100% correct, James. And it's not just one foreigner, it's two foreigners. Chris Elson, the Billboard Chris, as viewers know him, he'll be on Outsiders on Sunday morning. Chris is the bloke who instigated all this and simply by pointing out that Australia was sending to the World Health Organization, presumably on a fairly hefty salary, as an envoy on transgenderism, a character who, let's say that, according to Chris Elson, not really the most savoury character to be representing Australia. That's what the court case was all about. That's why Julie Inman Grant censored the tweet. And Chris fought it and has fought it successfully. So here you have, James, you have not only two foreigners, Elon Musk and Billboard Chris, fighting for Australia's freedom of speech. You have another foreigner, the American Julian Mann Grant, despite the fact that she was born in the land of the First Amendment, seems to be quite happy not to apply the values of the First Amendment to Australians. She even went so far as to say, well, the First Amendment doesn't exist in Australia, so she's quite happy to censor it with that knowledge. This is so pathetic that, as you say, James, Australia's political figures on the right have let this go through. Not only let this go through, they supported it. Malcolm Turnbull, Morrison, Peter Dutton all supported this Julian Mann Grant, this e-safety commissioner. They praised her, they chose her, and then they supported her. All Albanese has done is run along the same path. And this is why the Liberal Party is in such dire straits now. If the Liberal Party cannot understand the most fundamental precept of conservative / right-wing / liberal / libertarian, whatever you want to call it, politics, the right to free speech and the importance of parents having a say, not governments telling you what to think and believe. If the Liberals can't even get that into their skulls, then I'm afraid there's not much hope for them.
The thing is that these liberals, I mean, Mark Carney, like earlier in June, he was hoisting that LGBTQ flag up there on Parliament Hill. Proudly. And all these wackadoo freakazoids were cheering him on. Oh, I've got a picture I want to show you guys. Speaking about wackadoo freakazoids, let me see if I can find it here real quick. Yeah. Okay, this is Chrystia Freeland at the Toronto Pride Parade just this past weekend. Yeah, look at that. Oh, I'm so proud to be here. Look at this person that I'm with. Like, I think a lot of it, and you might have a different opinion, but I think a lot of it is simply that we're not polite. The people who are talking about this stuff, we're just not doing it politely. We're not polite enough for the average Canadian. We don't say it with enough sugar and spice and everything nice on it. And so because of our temperament and harsh wording, they get their backs up. And they don't want to hear it. So I'm working on ways, I'm trying so hard to work on ways of saying this oh so nicely. So let me try and I'm going to try and experiment with this here. See if I can throw this up. Yeah, okay. U.S. college bans transgender. Aw, that's too bad. Now you can see right through that, huh? U.S. college. I can't say this without being like gloating. U.S. college bans transgender athletes from competing with women following swimming furor. Again, a story from the Associated Press. University of Pennsylvania has agreed to ban transgender athletes from its women's sports team, settling a federal civil rights case stemming from the furor around Leah Thomas, the U.S. government said yesterday. The U.S. Department of Education said in a statement that UPenn had entered into a resolution agreement vowing to comply with Title IX, the federal law which prohibits sex-based discrimination in any educational program. You see, the Title IX was never designed for this. And now these trans people are trying to use it to their advantage. It follows an investigation by the Department's Office for Civil Rights, which found the university had violated Title IX by allowing transgender swimmer Thomas to compete in women's competitions in 2021 and 2022. Donald Trump, who campaigned on the issue of trans athletes, has worked to prohibit them from competing in girls and women's sports since returning to office. The big bad orange man. Trump issued an executive order in February aimed at banning transgender athletes, allowing federal agencies to halt funding to any institution that does not consider birth-assigned genders in determining sex. U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon, formerly of the World Wrestling Federation, Said in a statement yesterday, the resolution of the UPenn case marked a great victory for women and girls across our nation. The department commends UPenn for rectifying its past harms against women and girls, and we will continue to fight relentlessly to restore Title IX's proper application to enforce it to the fullest extent of the law. Oh, and here's one thing that's a little bit disappointing. You see, usually the news coming down from the United States, mostly good, but this one was not. Supreme Court denies review of case by group founded by RFK Jr. against Pointer and Meta. This would be the Children's Health Defense. They were wanting to go to the Supreme Court regarding the censorship of Facebook, and the Supreme Court said, no, I'm sorry, but we're not going to hear that case. I'm wondering why. Why would you not hear that case? He admitted it to millions of people on Joe Rogan not so long ago. Mark Zuckerberg did that. Yeah, we did censor many accounts. We did ban many accounts. We did deactivate many accounts for so-called mis and disinformation because we were told to by Biden. Sorry, the Biden administration. I want to be absolutely clear on that. But the Supreme Court just, no. It's kind of a slam dunk. Finally on the show tonight, speaking of RFK Jr., here he is with Tucker Carlson just a couple of days ago.
Do if you wanted to find the answer, which is to compare outcomes in a fully vaccinated group to health outcomes in an unvaccinated group. And CDC did that study in...
Oh, hang on. I should say, before continuing with this, that this is for entertainment purposes only.
In 1999, they brought in a team of scientists under a Belgian researcher named Thomas Verstraeten, and they looked at the data. They looked at children who had received the hepatitis vaccine within the first 30 days of life, and compare those children to children who had received the vaccine later or not at all. And they found an 135% elevated risk of autism among the vaccinated children. And it shocked them. They kept the study secret, and then they manipulated it through 5 different iterations to try to bury the link. And, we know how they did it. They got rid of all the older children, essentially, and just had younger children who were too young to be diagnosed. And they stratified the data, and they did a lot of other tricks. And all of those studies were the subject of that kind of trickery.
So how are we expected to trust the institutions of our government, paid for by us, if they are continually found to be lying? Doesn't make sense. But Mark Carney says Canadians are uniting as the new world order forms. Old friends are no longer friends. We're making new friends. And of course, we're making the transition to green energy. Smart cities, central bank digital currencies for your own safety and the safety of your families, of course. Of course. That's what we're going into tonight on the extension on shadowdavis.com. If you're not a member, please become one at shadowdavis.com. That's SHADOEDAVIS.com. Get all the extra content, and you don't have to watch it at night. You don't have to watch it live. You can come back and watch it the next day. You can watch it next week if you want to. When you're a member, you have that privilege. And if you become a member now, I mean, seriously, you've got all kinds of extra content to go through. It's been piling up there for the last year and a half. Stuff that you probably have never heard of before. Stuff that will blow, to use a Mario for the North expression, I'm going to blow your mind. I'm going to blow your mind right now. Stuff that will probably literally blow you away. Well, not literally. Blow you away in the extension. For the past year and a half, man, it's gold. And it costs you, what, like $10, $11 a month. Go become a member, shadowdavis.com. And somebody messaged me, actually several people have messaged me in the last couple of weeks saying, Shadow, I'm not really much of a joiner. I don't want to join your website. Is that okay? I say, yeah, it's fine. If you don't want to, you don't want to. But I'd like to make a donation to you if you would let me. Say, yeah, of course. I never mentioned that. If you guys would like to make a donation to the show to help keep it going, of course you can. Send e-transfers to shadowdavis@gmail.com. Again, that is shadowdavis@gmail.com. It doesn't have to be $100 or whatever. It's whatever you can afford, whatever you think I deserve. Go ahead and send that e-transfer and use the name Shadow, SHADOE, as the password, please, and thank you. The extension is coming up in 2 minutes. Again, tonight, it's CBDCs and smart cities. By the way, what do you think is the first smart city in Canada? I always thought Edmonton for some reason, because we've been talking about Edmonton the longest. Vancouver as well, Toronto. It's none of those three. Any ideas? Now, this is unofficial. It's the guy from World Alternative Media who's made this call. I would happen to agree with him, having recently been there myself. What is the first smart city, the actual first 15-minute city in Canada? We're going to get into that in the extension in just a second. I love you all. I appreciate you all, and I will catch you again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central for another Shadow at Night live stream. Good night now.